We are in part 1 of getting started. So we're actually going to wrap up a few of our writing conversations from last time. I thought that was really important for us to do. And then we are going to transition into that part 1. So we'll talk a little bit about some tools that some of our local partnerships have used, some state resources to kind of get partnership work started. And then next week is our last session together, and we're going to be going over some of the state templates, as well as some of the other resources and considerations for developing and implementing a transitional English course. Incidentally, next week, I'll share with you a survey that one of our team members created and actually implemented to get some student feedback, because a piece of this implementation is making sure that we're successful. So we have some student surveys to share with you today. I have some teacher surveys to share with you. So really excited to kind of keep moving into this phase as far as development and implementation. So buckle in. We're going to start off this afternoon in our hour together by revisiting some conversations about some writing shifts. And I know there's always a lot of questions around writing, what that should look like in this course, this idea of multiple drafts, what does that look like? So I've pulled some research for us to take a look at. And I've also pulled some samples from some of the language used in the approved courses that were submitted to the state portability panel. So I thought we would start off by kind of taking a look at those to give ourselves a vision and some context and some ideas around writing in transitional English and what that might look like as we craft and implement our course. So the first thing I kind of wanted to start off with this afternoon, and I love a good, I like to call it my gas gauge. John Hattie, who is one of my favorite researchers, uses this kind of visual to look at effect sizes. And so the effect sizes that I've pulled here on the left are actually from the Writing Next report. The hyperlink for that report is down here at the bottom of the screen, as well up here as hyperlinked in the title. The Writing Next report, there were also some other, if you're familiar with the Carnegie Foundation, they've published lots of research and resources related to reading and writing. This is a 2007 report. However, there are some pretty significant findings that are directly correlated to what we're seeing in transitional English that I thought were pretty significant to share. So coming back to some of our effect sizes and some of the 11 key recommendations for effective writing instruction in that Writing Next report, I have those pieces here along with their effect sizes. And just to contextualize this, in case you're not familiar, anything, the hinge point for effect sizes is really right around a 0.4. Anything greater than that has a significant impact on student achievement. And so we're looking at some of these really high leverage practices or strategies to use with young writers to grow their capacity to write and to communicate. And I bolded the top 4 because I really felt like those were explicitly correlated to the work that we're doing in transitional English. So, as we move forward with writing and incorporating that writing component into our transitional English courses, we want to be thinking about what strategies are we teaching and using consistently with students. And that's something we want to make sure that we articulate in that syllabus. And also, we know that there are competencies and key performance indicators that do explicitly address writing strategies. So incorporating those are not only going to be in alignment with our competencies and policies document, it also has a significant impact on student growth and writing. Summarization is another great strategy to use for writing. And I would argue that that ability to summarize is also great for developing and refining reading comprehension. That has also an effect size of 0.82, which is significant. Collaborative writing. So when we talk about this idea of peer revision, when we think about those process skills and competencies, and the fact that we want students to be working together to grapple with some of these critical thinking and analysis components that are present within our key performance indicators and competencies for this course, that is really going to provide a solid foundation for student writing achievement. And so we should really be intentional about how we're incorporating those collaboration pieces within each unit of instruction. And then this idea of specific product goals. We mentioned last week tech sets, and we were building towards something. But to take that a step further, are students aware of what high quality writing looks like? Are they aware of the expectations of the assignment? How are we teaching them to use the rubric? How are we teaching them to look at and analyze others' work, including their own? So if we're doing some of these practices within our transitional English course, again, we're not only going to be hitting those competencies and key performance indicators, but we're also going to be building strong writers through some solid strategies. Now, that's not to say that the rest of these findings from the Writing Next report are anything to sneeze at. Their effect size might be somewhat smaller. Word processing, allowing students to, gosh, that sounds like an old word now, doesn't it? Word processing. But allowing students to use technology to write and revise their thinking does have a fairly strong effect size. Pre-writing has an effect size of 0.3. Which might surprise some of you. Process writing approach, study of models, writing for different content area learning, those all have some kind of impact. They might not just have as strong of an impact as what we would see from some of our really high leverage instructional strategies that we see up there at the top. So be thinking about those as you're contemplating what writing looks like. And just a moment, I'm going to share with you what some of our approved courses have included as far as writing to maybe give you a little bit of a better picture. So we know that writing, especially in this course, through the competencies and key performance indicators that we've looked at, really needs to adapt to the audience, the purpose, and the task. So that's very explicitly articulated in those competencies. We know that we are working to develop writing that incorporates lots of different relevant information from a variety of sources. That includes, we talked about this last time, pictures, posters, songs, podcasts, all kinds of different texts. So how are we teaching students to pull evidence from those sources as well as cite them appropriately? We know that in transitional English and really in all good writing, we want to make sure that we are using evidence to support our claims. So that whole claim evidence reasoning model, which incidentally, the reasoning pieces typically where we see a lot of our students kind of fall apart. We want them to have a strong lens when it comes to evaluating source material. So being critical consumers of the information that they are encountering, whether that's on the web or in print materials. And we want to build a culture where there is this idea we're constantly providing and responding to feedback in order to improve our own writing. And so I've hyperlinked for you here. This is a document. We had a conversation as a local partnership about what does it mean to create multiple drafts. And this might be something that your partnership feels that it needs to talk about as well. But if you click into the hyperlink, it should open up here another Google Doc for you. And between the community college and our secondary partners, we reached consensus on this a few summers ago. to really provide some guidance to our teachers as far as what that should look like in that high school classroom. So I offer this as perhaps some food for thought. If you are grappling with it in your own partnerships or classrooms, this might give you some insight or ideas. Notice that a lot of these are not full drafts. We talked about the importance of creating rough drafts, partial drafts, where that writing conference piece comes in and that feedback element comes into play. And all of these are really important just to make sure that we're all on the same page and sharing the same language. So that is there for your perusal. I want to share with you now, and then I'm going to actually put you in some breakout rooms to actually explore some full course drafts. But I wanted to share with you just some approaches to writing that we have found in the portability submissions to the state portability panel. And these all come from approved courses. And you're going to notice that they look very different. So some of these I just pulled because I know some of you were kind of thinking about, well, what should I be thinking about in terms of length or word count? What should I be thinking about in terms of what it is the students are producing? So I tried to provide and pull a wide variety of samples just to kind of get our thinking going and maybe put some bumpers on or give you some ideas of what other schools and partnerships have put bumpers on as far as writing goes. So in this submission, so this is our first sample submission. This is pulled directly from that grading section on the syllabus document. And the district articulated that their writing in this transitional English course would be comprised of short writing activities, other writing activities, reflection and analysis assignments, and larger essays, which would include any drafting or revisions. And so they have word counts established ranging from 500 words to 2,500 words. But I think it is important to note that overall, the formal graded writing and analysis account for 60% of the final grade. So this was in their syllabus submission that was approved by the portability panel. Now, are we saying that you have to write 1,000 words? No, this was a partnership decision to put a word count on each kind of writing that was going to be transpiring. And so this might just give you some ideas about what some other partnerships are considering. This is a second sample from an approved submission. And so this was again from that grading section of the syllabus, where the summative writing assessments were chunked into two different categories. One was for fall semester, and the second was from spring semester. And so all of these writing assignments in total accounted for 70% of the fall semester grade and 70% of the spring semester grade. And you can kind of take a look at the weight of each of these summative. I think it's important to note that they use the word summative writing assignments. So there on fall semester, there were two argumentative pieces of writing, writing about relevant issues as well as intuition or logic. And they gave a word count range, which looks a little bit different, not too far off, but a little different from our earlier submission. You'll notice that we had lots of questions last time about, gosh, does everything have to be a paper? Well, you'll notice in here, there's some independent research and there's a TED Talk. So the students are writing and then presenting a TED Talk. They are also, at the end of each semester, submitting an electronic portfolio of their work, which I think is a great practice if you can work a portfolio in there. You'll also notice that there is a little bit of variety to the type of writing, especially as we're looking toward that spring semester. We've got a movie review in there. We've got a poetry explication. There's another piece of argumentative writing. And again, we're looking at that electronic portfolio submission. Some of those argumentative and research pieces are more heavily weighted in this course proposal. So that's another conversation and consideration as far as how you might weight some of those. And that I would encourage you to go back to the competencies and policies document and think about the competencies and KPIs that you're going to be addressing in each of those in order to kind of determine that weight. This is a third sample from an approved submission. And so this one looks a little bit different than what we've looked at before. So again, articulating that there are multiple draft essays progressing in length and depth. So this course that was approved has 4 multiple draft essays in accordance with the competencies and policies document following MLA formatting. And so they are focused on narrative, process analysis, and argumentative writing. Just as a side note, they have persuasive in parentheses here for our purposes. I really want to encourage you to avoid using the word persuasion. In our high school standards, students are working on argumentative writing, which is very different from persuasive writing. So if we want to be in alignment with those grade band 11, 12 Illinois learning standards, we really should be using the language of argumentative writing. So that's just a personal aside there. So each of these essays, the first 2 are 750 words, 3 pages, and then that argumentative essay is about 1,000 words. So you can see here where this submission looks just a little bit different from the ones that we previously looked at. Also, from this same exact building or district submission, there was a final project notation. And so this particular district is offering 2 options for a final writing project. The first option is a 4th essay, which is argumentative in nature, can serve as a final project if time is short. However, the second option would be a separate final project, and students are going to write a 5-page paper in order to address some of those process skills and competencies, as well as the content competencies. And really, this looks like it's more of a reflection and narrative writing piece on some of the competencies that they have addressed in their learning. So, we saw a portfolio submission earlier, an electronic portfolio submission. This one is a final project that is being used for one of the summative writing pieces. So that is also an option if you haven't thought about that with your particular submission. And then this final example is from, again, one approved course from a district. I pulled out of their submission their narrative example, as well as their final project, which was a portfolio assignment, which is a little bit different from what we saw earlier. So in the narrative example, and this was from one of their units of instruction. They had really particular look-fors that were articulated in the competencies that they were focused on in this particular writing assignment, which I would then expect to see in their rubric. And the piece here that I would draw your attention to is the fact that they're doing peer reviews of their narrative essays to provide feedback and revise drafts based on that feedback. So that is something the portability panel will look for. They will look for evidence of feedback, multiple drafts, strategies. So please make sure that when you are crafting your submission to your portability panel, that you're very explicit about what some of these things look like. And what I love about this final submission here for semester 1 is not only are students submitting a portfolio, they're using that evidence, they're revisiting an earlier piece of their writing, and they're also reflecting on their growth as writers throughout the semester. So they're using the feedback, they're using their rubrics, to reflect not only to reflect and improve not only one of those pieces, but also on their overall experience, which really gets at that metacognitive piece. Remember those circles that were overlapping? Metacognition was the big circle that surrounded all of that. So that's a direct and explicit link to some of our process skills and competencies. So I hope some of this was helpful. I know there were a lot of questions around, gosh, what does this look like from an instructional standpoint? What does this look like from a grading standpoint? How long? What are some of those logistics? So I hope you see that there's a wide variety, but we'll always go back to those competencies and policies documents to help guide some of our decisions when it comes to writing within this course. This is purely a scope of work that we used as a local partnership. In our partnership, we've come together and we have decided that all of our high schools are going to send a contributing English faculty member, and we were going to work on creating units that all of us would share, just because we're very rural, and it would behoove all of our teachers to work collaboratively together, so they didn't feel like they were in it alone. And so that there's a great power in that partnership. So we did in our first year, so we're moving into year 3 in this work. In our first year, we identified teacher leaders to engage into this partnership conversation. And we identified at least 2 to 3 of our community college faculty to serve on the team for this work. We took a look at a lot of our baseline data to find out where we were at as a community and what we were trying to tackle as far as remediation rates. We did some close reading of those transitional English competencies and key performance indicators to gain some common language between secondary and post-secondary, and even between our secondary educators as far as what they meant and what we were asking students to do. We also did a crosswalk. So as high school educators, we are responsible to our school boards and we are responsible to our administrators to be able to report that we are addressing those senior level Illinois learning standards. And so we did complete a crosswalk, which I have hyperlinked a little bit later. We kind of talked about the shifts related to transitional English. We developed a competency rubric, which is also displayed here a little bit later. And we made sure that we identified a shared language for the work, which included our approaches to themes and how we were kind of getting at that critical thinking and analysis piece through compelling questions, lines of inquiry, common concepts, and some of those other things that we had talked about. And then in year 1, we also started to kind of brainstorm those themes or those central questions or lines of inquiries and those tech sets that we talked about last time, just to kind of get some creativity going within the course development process. In our second year, our group developed an administrator academy. We actually recorded videos of local businesses, and it's hyperlinked here. Capturing businesses talking about how they use reading and writing and communication in their industry and in their sector. We felt that was really important for our students locally to kind of see that there was a relevance to what they were going to be engaging in. And we actually continue to build that library each year. We developed a curriculum framework, a scope and sequence, and some assessment pieces, which I will be sharing with you next time. And we collaborated with our Chamber of Commerce to develop some soft skills trainings. And then with everybody working on various parts of this work, we hired an external reviewer to review all of our work for consistency and alignment. This is year 3. So these are all the things that we're going to be doing this summer and into next summer. So we're going to be reviewing some pilot information. We're going to be refining our work. We're thinking about, we're such a small community. What happens if, let's say, we don't have enough to fill a class in a really small high school? The nice part about transitional English is that it can be offered concurrently with their senior year of English. So we anticipate fewer issues than what we experienced in transitional math, but we're going to be preparing for alternate delivery methods. So those are some of the things that we have been up to in the last 3 years. And so I would ask each of you to maybe reflect in your partnerships or in your buildings, do you have a plan or a scope of work laid out so that you can meaningfully tackle some of this work together and no one person has to shoulder that kind of burden of developing and vetting and submitting, because there is, again, so much strength in collaboration. So be thinking about, and feel free to use any of these kinds of tasks or activities to maybe go back and reflect and go back to your partnership or your administration and say, gosh, where are we at with this? And how do we need to move forward? I know we are at time for today, but I want to just show you a few things that you might want to explore, and we'll start with these next time. But that common language and vision piece is such an important first step in this work. We took a lot of time to do this. So there's a few resources that I've hyperlinked. One is a survey. So we did a regional literacy practices survey. I put the link to the survey down here. So if you wanted to make a copy of it and use it, it's based on John Hattie's work on visible learning for literacy. We just wanted to see what practices were out there in our community, and, you know, based on some of the conversations we've had today, how much are we going to have to provide professional learning and adjust what we're doing as a senior level English course to make the transition to transitional English. I also kind of included a snapshot of how we started to create that vision. I'll talk a little bit more about this briefly next time, but basically I gave them some units of instruction to review. And we kind of did what we did today, is we talked about those units of instruction in light of some of those shifts we learned about with transitional English. We did some close reading. So this is the template that we did with close reading. I will go back and hyperlink some of our, it is hyperlinked here. So you can click into here and see what some of our notes were. Some of the competencies and KPIs were like, I have no idea what this means. So that's an area where we tried to reach consensus for ourselves. Here's that copy of a crosswalk. So if you are interested, I do have to do some cleanup work on this. And this is one of the things the state group is going to be putting out as a resource. But we felt it was important to do that crosswalk so that we knew that we were addressing some of those senior level Illinois learning standards as well. And then this is a link to the competency rubric that we developed. I'm going to talk again a little bit more about this next time. But this helped us to think about that learning progression and where some of our students might be entering the learning, where we could enrich some of that learning for students who have already mastered some of those competencies and key performance indicators. Big picture did a great deal for us in terms of being all on the same page and establishing that common language. So when we get together next week for our final session, the first thing we're going to do is I'll put you into discussion groups to maybe talk about this idea of common language and some of these resources that I've shared with you here on these slides, and give you some time to kind of talk about how you've established common language or what other pieces you might want to work on. And then we will dig into the transitional English state template for recording some of that work, and talk about how we can think about putting together some text sets and other resources. I hope some of these resources are helpful as you start thinking about getting started. And we will start off with this next week and allow for some conversation and reflection